Le sprinkler.
Hey, Mathieu.
Hey, Rick. Long time ago since we talk in English.
Yeah, it's been a while. I think our last podcast in English was with Esther Derby.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I don't even remember when it was, but it was
It was a
pretty
long.
cool.
And as you notice, we're out of the studio. Well, I'm in the studio, but you're not, and
No,
our guest
I'm
is
on my
not,
basement right
uh,
now. So, but
because
we'll get back in the studio pretty soon. We
yeah, it's not a question of confinement or whatnot. It's just being able, having the opportunity to talk with this newbie in the agile community.
the new guy from the
Or
block, right?
you might know him as Scotch Ambler or Scott Ambler.
Good morning, Scott. Good morning. Good evening,
Good
Scott.
morning.
Good evening. Evening, morning, depends on when you're watching.
Yeah, you were telling us you're actually in a hotel room right now in around Quebec City.
I am, yeah. I'm not that far away from you. I'm in the process of going home for my in-laws.
Oh,
Okay.
it wasn't for a gig or anything.
No. I was I'm just ending a vacation.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
we could have seen each other maybe because I was in Quebec City from Wednesday to Friday last week.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
I'm just passing through from Cape Breton.
Oh, really? Really?
Yeah.
Well, huge thanks for
Oh,
taking
my
time
pleasure.
off your vacation to talking with
Yeah.
us. I would have known. I feel bad now. I feel kind of guilty. Uh,
We'll have so much fun. It will feel like
It
vacation,
won't be
our
work.
discussion right now. Yeah.
yeah. So I said newbie, but obviously nobody believes that. Scott, you've been around for a hell of a long time. I actually think one of my first agile conferences that I attended 2004 2005 was you
Oh,
where
okay.
you were presenting it at some company. I forget which company it was. I forget what the subject, probably agile modeling or something,
It was
most
probably
probably.
agile
Yeah,
modeling or
yeah.
agile data back then, but yeah.
Because I'm old now and I'm allowed to forget, so everybody will forgive me. um,
But you remember, Scott.
I remember Scott. Yeah, Scott. I've seen you so often. At some point, you just talked about stats because you used to be a collaborator at Dr. Dobbs.
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
one of the contributing editors, and I ran their a lot of the research effort back in the day.
yeah. So I remember that you did that Agile tour about 1 billion years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was at an old building on Saint Patrick in Montreal.
Yeah.
You could hear the stuff happening on the top floor, just disturbing all the conferences. It was just the
Yeah.
beginnings of Agile tour, like 250 participants at that
It
moment.
was
Yeah.
before the location at the UCAM, right?
Oh yes, absolutely.
Okay.
It was before
Wasn't even
that.
there.
Before the small location that you can,
Okay.
and then it was a bigger location later on. But yeah, I think we'll be talking a little bit about Disciplined Agile,
Yeah.
What is it?
also known as what's the slogan? Twice the work and half the time. Is that right?
Yeah, no, that would be
No.
another.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
another
that
one.
would be something else. Yeah.
So I guess we'll start the way Matthew likes to start things.
How it was. Just
In a nutshell, I'm pretty sure most
yeah.
people know about DA now, but in a nutshell, what is DA?
Yeah. So
For the newbie.
Disciplined Agile is a toolkit. I think this is one of the things that people sort of struggle with as a concept. So everybody's used to methods and frameworks that tell you what to do, regardless of their marketing rhetoric. But DA helps you make choices and helps you to understand where what your choices are and pick the right approach for you that's best in your context. So so lately in the last few years, people have been taking a more experimental approach to process improvement, or at least they've been trying, right? We get all this rhetoric around failing fast and all that good sort of stuff, and it's great, right? You should have a fit for purpose process. Why wouldn't you want to? And why wouldn't you want to be continuous improving and good stuff like that? DA helps you do that. So where the methods and frameworks basically leave it up to you. There's this underlying assumption that you're a process expert, and that's pretty much not true for the vast majority of people, and that's okay. They shouldn't have to be process experts,
Mhm.
but if we're on the hook for formulating our own process, which we effectively are, this is a fundamental of, I would argue this is a fundamental of Agile, then you might want to have some help rather than just randomly choosing things or hoping that some coach can come along and point you in the right direction, which also may or may not work out well. So DA helps you make choices and helps you understand here, so instead of telling you what to do, we say, here, you need to really sort of think about these issues. And some choices get made for you because of your work environment. But what happens is, but for these other issues, here's some choice, here are the choices. Instead of saying there's the one official way of doing requirements, we say, well, wait a minute, there's several different ways you can approach requirements. Here are the trade-offs. Why don't you choose the right technique for you in your situation right now? Do the best that you can in the situation that you face and always try to get better. And this is what DA is all about. And it's, in some ways, it's like an agile coach in a box.
Okay. Yeah.
My partner Mark Lyons likes to say that. So
okay. So how does DA do that exactly? How does the DA documentation? You're referring to the various documentation available regarding DA. How does it help me succeed quicker?
Yeah, so the basic idea is, so it depends on your level of expertise, right? So the more expert you are, the less help you're going to need generally. Mm. So it works in a detailed, from a high level to a detailed manner. So the basic idea is, so you're in a retrospective, you identify, hey, we've got a problem with the way we're gathering requirements or exploring requirements with their stakeholders. Whatever the issue is, right? So then if you happen to have like a business analyst on staff or like on your team or somebody who's an expert at requirement stuff, then more than likely, you've got a pretty good shot at identifying a technique to experiment with, because they'll just say, well, wait a minute. Yes, in this situation, I've done this before and that seemed to work out well. I tried that and that didn't work out so well, but I think this is going to work. So let's experiment with that. Mm-hmm. But let's say that's not the case for you, right? Because you don't have all the expertise in the world on any given team. Yeah. So then you dive down to the next level, which is what we call a goal diagram, which is basically a decision tree. So the idea with goal diagrams is that they say, so when you're exploring scope, here are the 10 issues or whatever I don't know what the number is, but whatever the number is, here's the 10 issues you really want to consider. Now, some of those decisions, as I said, have already been made for you, and you're probably only struggling right now with one or two. So for example, how are we exploring data stuff? Might be the, we get this, we don't really have a clue about the data things. So then you go to the list of potential ways to look at data-oriented requirements. Now, if you have reasonable expertise at data stuff, then more than likely that, it's basically a checklist at that point, and that's enough, right? Oh yeah, I remember, logical data models. That, we should be doing a logical data model. Yeah, why didn't I remember that? Or you look at those going, I don't know anything about data. So then you go down the next level of detail, which is basically a table of information where, so of the 7 techniques that were listed, there's a paragraph description for each one. And there's also a list of trade-offs. So there's just enough information for you to get an understanding of what that technique is all about. There's also, and then for a lot of people, that's enough. But if not, then there's also references, go off and read this book, read this article, watch this video, whatever you're into, right? So, and so you just keep drilling down to the level of detail until you get to a point where, oh yeah, that's enough information for me to, and the team looks and goes, yeah, let's experiment with that technique, logical data modeling, because that sounds like it's going to work for us in our situation. So here's the value prop, right? So instead of you just running into a problem and then, just stumbling about in the dark, trying to, what should we experiment? Well, why don't we try sticky notes? I don't know. Why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? If you've got no clue, then it's not, you're in trouble, right? Like and if you just happen to, be able to Google it and then find out, and if you know the terms to Google on, and if you can sift through, the thousands of things you're going to get, then maybe you'll be able to stumble into it yourself. But more than likely, no, right? So what's going to happen is, if you really don't understand this aspect of your process, then you will identify something and try to experiment with it, and more than likely you're going to fail, right? And this is where all the fail fast nonsense starts to kick in, right? And sure, failing fast is way better than failing slowly. Like, I'll give everybody that one.
Or failing big, yeah.
Or failing big, yeah. But failing is still failing, right? So if I could just be a little bit smarter about identifying, let's experiment with this technique and reduce the chance of failure, then we succeed faster. We succeed more often, and as a result, we improve faster, and we improve. It's cheaper and faster that way.
And DA can do that. In DA, we can pinpoint the issue, and DA will offer alternatives based on your context, based on the situation, with trade-offs and pluses and minuses. And then
that's exactly it, right? So you can make better decisions, and that. Yeah. So, and the basic premise is, if you have just a little humility to understand that more than likely the problems you're facing right now have been faced by thousands of teams before you and addressed successfully, then you can leverage their learnings if you know how to find them, if you know how to choose between them. And that's where, but you don't unless you're very experienced, you just don't have the background to make those decisions. But that's the assumption that everybody wants to make, right? So I got to question that assumption, because it doesn't hold water in practice. So DA helps to fill in the blanks, helps to fill in the blanks of your knowledge by helping you give those choices in a reasonably consumable manner. Now you still got to do a little bit of reading and
experimenting also.
Yeah, like anything, right? Like, but at least it's going to get you going in the right direction, which is way better than if you're flailing about by yourself.
So I could say goodbye to my agile coaching career. That's over and done with.
Well, no,
been replaced by that tree.
Yeah, I wish I could say that was true, but being an agile coach myself.
Are you still coaching?
I do actually.
Good.
It's a habit. I'm a recovering coach. I'm doing my best to. I'm always coaching, right? So, but the thing is that a coach with the toolkit is far more effective than a coach without. And as you know, there's a lot of coaches out there that might not have the experience to really be coaches, and yet they're claiming to be coaches, right? And that's a serious problem. It's
the easiest thing in the world to become an agile coach. Just change your profile your LinkedIn profile, and that's it.
That's you probably have to take a 2-day certification course first, but
not even
needed.
Suddenly you're a master, right, after 2 days. But seriously though, it's there's even like the best of coaches still need help, and you can't possibly have the full range of background that you need to coach. You might be a great software coach, but then you've got to coach somebody in finance, or you've got to coach somebody in marketing, and you're out of luck. You're just out of luck. And you're going to sound like an idiot, right? And it happens all the time with these great agile coaches, and then suddenly they're going, trying to coach the finance people to change the way they do funding or change the way to this, and it honestly help them, but they don't really understand finance. And the finance, like I get complaints like this from CFOs all the time, right? They listen to the agile people and they go, it's like listening to my children whine. It's like I have this agile, we've got all these agile coaches, and I would rather go to my 10-year-old and get advice from my 10-year-old rather than these agile coaches.
So Scott,
right? The 10-year-old knows they don't know anything about finance and aren't going to be lecturing me on how to do finance.
Scott, you went there.
I did go there.
Because I've been doing a deep dive in Scott, Scott stuff, and for the last few days. No, it was actually kind of fun.
You need to seek help.
Maybe I will.
Can I find that elk in your tree?
This is not coffee. The children thing.
Yeah.
It bugs me deeply. For many reasons. For one of the reasons that you're right. That's one of the reasons. The other reason is that if I wasn't, in 15 years ago, when I started coaching, if I wasn't that child, that naive person that asked the naive questions to HR, or obviously technical teams, obviously, but also HR, finance, and so on and so forth, nothing would have happened. And I enjoy asking those naive questions. We say agile coach, right? Coach.
Yeah.
I enjoy asking questions. It's something I like to do.
Which is okay, but helping people make decisions is also part of that.
Yeah,
guiding them, right?
Yeah, that's the agile part.
Yeah, and sometimes the questions are, it is like, if you've got children, if you've raised children, like the questions that of a 4-year-old, they're fun, and often very entertaining, but you don't really take them seriously. It's like, oh yeah, of course, yeah. It's just the other day, my daughter was trying to convince me that she had seen some type of shark out in the water, right? Because she'd just been reading about a couple days a goblin shark or so. I can't remember what it was. So she'd been reading about that and watched a video on YouTube. So now suddenly she was a goblin shark expert. And of course, we saw something out in the water, which was probably a wave, but maybe it was a fin. But it was a goblin shark fin. She knew that, right? So she was asking me, about how do you go, how do you spot whales and stuff like that. And then suddenly she was a whale spotting expert 5 minutes later, all this sort of stuff, right? And this is what happens with agile, with many people in general. There's this unfortunate disregard for expertise sometimes. And this is not just an agile coaching thing. This is just a unfortunate societal thing. But the experts in it, the experts in goblin sharks certainly aren't going to listen to my daughter. The experts in finance certainly aren't going to listen to somebody that doesn't, when your question is, what's the difference between CapEx and OpEx? It's all over.
You're done.
Over. You are no longer coaching that finance person if that's the type of question you're asking, right? So this, I think, is it's great they're asking. It's great. My daughter is interested in goblin sharks or whatever the things were. I don't know. But
let's go about it a different way. If I wasn't naive and stupid, purposely naive and stupid, we'd probably still be doing projects with P+ and macroscope and I ever heard of rational unified process?
Yeah. It's still out there in the wild, by the way.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I in the first few years, I was a P+ macroscope killer because it just didn't make sense. Just asking these simple questions. Yeah, true. In the beginning, I wasn't really coaching. I was more like telling people what to do. But that's another story. I learned from those successes and mistakes. I say successes because you actually mentioned it in one of your conferences. Some teams were so horrible. The whole place was just chaotic and just horrible kind of a situation that I would have changed the coffee and things would have been better. I'm quoting you right here.
I've done that. Yeah.
That's from your India conference. I took that from. Yeah. How do we? Because we still want to generate change in order to help organization deliver value, have people enjoy what they're doing, help people be awesome, and so on and so forth. How can we continue having that childish approach without being perceived as a child by finance or HR or even IT?
Well, I think it's a thing. It becomes an issue of knowing your limits, and always and you always want to go a little beyond your limits. But there's a difference between going 10% past your limits because you're learning and expanding versus you're like 5,000% way past the limit on your level of knowledge. And what do it's like yes, goblin sharks, good, yeah, good, okay, fun, yeah, it was certainly goblin shark, honey. And move on, right? So I think that's it, right? So I think there's you see this issue of people who are very clearly junior coaches presenting themselves as the senior enterprise coach, and not knowing any better. I'm sure there's some people that are doing it on purpose, but for the most part, they just don't know better because everybody else is doing it, right? I constantly hear this. I don't know why we're picking coaches so much, but I constantly hear this this lament that, well, it's okay for me to do it because everybody else is doing it too. No, it really isn't. And maybe you should rethink that. So and you can be you could be coaching for 15 years, but then suddenly somebody comes along and says, could you please coach me about whale watching? And you've never gone whale watching. You don't even know how to spell the word whale. So even here you are an agile coach with 15 years experience. You have exactly zero experience in whales. So how dare you present yourself as a whale coach? And as the whale, a senior whale watching coach, enterprise whale coach, whatever that title would be. So I think, and that happens a lot. So a couple of years ago, before I joined PMI, I was asked out to lunch with a senior executive at one of the big banks in downtown Toronto. And they were on, Agile Transformation 17 or whatever one it was. And it had gone poorly for some reason. And they're trying to
Scott, it's called repeat business, okay?
Repeat business. Yeah. Well, sadly. But yeah, so he's picking my brain, trying to figure out what went wrong, right? So he's telling me this story. And it's a big bank, so you know exactly what went wrong, but I'm listening anyways. And he says, so and so, I hired so and so, and she was running it, and I knew her, right? And she was a really smart lady in her late 20s. So here's this lady, very smart lady, without a doubt, in her late 20s, trying to run a transformation at a large Canadian bank. There was absolutely no hope of that succeeding. Zero hope. And sure enough, she crashed and burned because she was in way over her head. And what had happened was, so as soon as I heard it was her again, oh my God, why would you do that? Even though she's really smart, not for a large Canadian bank. Sorry, 15, 20 years from now, yeah, for sure. Now, no. But anyway, so he's telling me the story, and I'm thinking I could list off 10 reasons right away, without even listening to this guy, of why she would have crashed and burned, right? And sure enough, the COBOL guys wouldn't listen to her. Kicks, because she got him. Yeah. So getting back to your naive questions, right?
We can say Java now, by the way. It's old. It's pretty old now.
It's the new COBOL. Yeah. People will be programming in Java and COBOL long before, long after we're dead.
We often say COBOL is not dead. It just smells funny.
Yeah, well, yeah. It's anyways, don't pick on COBOL. It's actually becoming a COBOL programmer is one heck of a career move for anybody, for the last 10 or 15 years. So if you want big money, doing interesting things often too. But anyways, back on track. But it gets back to the naive questions, right? So apparently, she was, trying to convince some ancient COBOL team to go Agile because Agile's great, rah. And they start saying, well, this isn't going to work because, and you know the story, right? There's a long list of reasons why they couldn't possibly change. And they threw out a term, kicks, right? So for those of you listening, if you don't know what it is, doesn't matter. But
I'm listening. I don't know what it is.
Oh, well, okay. See, that's the problem. Right? So apparently she asked, right? Well, what's kicks? So just asking that question, she might as well have just said, I don't belong in this room to those people.
Just by that question.
Yeah. It's like saying what's COBOL or what's Java, right? You're trying to coach a team of Java programmers and you say, what's Java?
Okay, but I'm dying here. What the hell is kicks?
It's a color process. Okay,
I thought maybe you just made up that term. I never heard of it. Jeez.
No, what's kicks? Pretty much every ancient bank runs on it. So it's a transaction processing system. So implemented ACID transactions. So it's from the mid to late 70s IBM product, and all the big banks run on it.
Yeah.
So when you process
I think your range of like 10% or whatever, and you have to take that in consideration, because I often coach one-on-one coaching. IT, except for kicks, IT doesn't have any much more secrets for me, but I often do one-on-one coaching with people I have no idea what they do. Like CXOs, for example. I've never been a CIO or a CTO. I was a developer for many years, so I can full of empathy and understanding and so on and so forth. But see whatever. I don't know. I just don't know. But I do coach them.
Yeah.
But this is not agile coaching though. This is coaching like one-on-one. Yeah. So it's a little bit different, but
a little bit different. Yeah. So the problem is that, you know, these ancient COBOL dudes were dealing with issues that were phenomenally complex, because it's almost by definition, right?
And sensitive.
So just by asking the question, she didn't belong in the room.
There's always that risk of losing credibility. It
was all over.
Yeah,
and her lack of kicks expertise wasn't the problem. It was just the lack of expertise, and it's just that she you know, just thrown in the deep end of the pool with an anchor around her neck, basically, right? So
I just started coaching a team where
she was amazing. I would have hired her on the spot, but not for that sort of a thing.
I just started coaching a team that they use Mendix. I never heard of it. But honestly, it did not penalize me in any. I'm sure other things penalized me.
You got lucky,
but could have.
It might have. Yeah. See, that's the thing. You don't know, right? So, and this is the problem. It's like, what naive question is going to shoot me in the foot? And if you've already built up a reputation, like if they know you, if you're a known factor, then not knowing Mendex or kicks or whatever might not have been an issue. But when you're going into a room cold with a hostile team, and hostile is probably being polite, and then ask, so what's kicks? Or what's COBOL? Like that would be equivalent to asking what's COBOL.
Yeah, you start at -1 basically. Yeah.
So we're starting at like -100.
We've been ignoring Mathieu for a while. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. I'm talking to Scott Ambler that Mathieu was out of my scope.
It's okay, guys. I need a little bit more caffeine just to get your level of energy. But
Mathieu, you got the stage.
He's crying on the inside.
I'm just curious, Scott. In your example, how could DA could help that young lady? Because instead of shooting herself in the foot, how could she use the DA toolkit just to navigate in that situation? Could you help us on that point, please?
That's a good question. Nobody's ever asked me that. You'd think they would, seeing as I've used that example several times. So if she knew how to use the toolkit, then instantly she should have understood. I would hope she would have understood that, this is a team that's dealing with a bunch of legacy stuff, right? So let's go look into legacy options. Now, if she still blurted out what's kicks, then it's going to be, nothing's going to help her there. But she should have known, oh my God, these guys have been dealing with COBOL for 30 or 40 years. Maybe they're dealing with a little bit of legacy stuff. Maybe I should, look into, what's it like to deal with legacy situation? And then, legacy architecture. And then maybe she would have stumbled into kicks or at least would have, known to ask, walk me through your existing architecture or walk me through your existing technology stack or whatever, right? Like that's a reasonable question. Whether, and it's a bunch of guys, so whether old guys, so whether they're going to answer is another story, but more than likely they would, right? And it's like, well, here, let me draw. And then suddenly, you'd go down into, this deep swamp of IBM technologies that you never wanted to learn about anyways. So, but at least, but she still would have been in play, right? And then she would have learned the horror story for why, being able to deliver once a month would be phenomenal rocket science in this situation, as opposed to, trying to push them for, let's deliver daily. Or even and probably delivering quarterly would have been a good thing for that team. But anyways, so that's the, it's just this deeper appreciation for the situation that they're in, right?
At a minimum, build some empathy towards that team by reading what's available.
And that's a very good point, right? Because what's interesting is when you start diving into some of the goals, you start realizing, man, there's way more to this than I would have thought. And actually, I don't know if you know him, Daniel Gagnon in Montreal. He walks through. He's got this really good presentation on DA and the goal diagrams, where he basically takes one. I can't remember what goal diagram. It doesn't matter. He takes one of the goal diagrams, and it's got all these options, right? 30 or 40 options, whatever. And it's like, how horrible this is. It's so complicated. But look at what the methods do. And then what he does is he blanks out all the stuff and only shows, here's what Scrum advises, or here's what SAFe advises, whatever method he's picking on at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And like 95% of the diagram is redacted,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's his point. It's like, you're being told what to do. Yes, it's hard to make choices. And yes, it looks complicated, because you know what you do is complicated. Like what this COBOL team is doing is phenomenally, horribly complicated, which is why they're still around, and why they'll be around for many, many years to come. So this is the challenge, right? Mm-hmm. Is understand, like having empathy, or at least understanding, if not empathy, for the challenge, the complexity of the challenges that we face, right?
Absolutely.
And this is this I think is the challenge I get from executives when they say, talking to these agile coaches is like talking with children, and I hear that a lot. Like, this is not just a one-off. I've been hearing this for years, and sometimes a little more polite than that, sometimes not so polite. Way, four-letter words get used sometimes.
I love it when a new Scrum Master or Agile coach says, well, the Scrum Guide says, and I'm like, I don't give a fuck what the Scrum Guide says. I don't care.
Can you imagine? Can you imagine talking to an experienced, finance person and an experienced architect, and say, here's what this 13-page body of knowledge says. And meanwhile, this person's been doing their job for 30 or 40 years. They probably have a university degree or two in it. And then this clown's coming along with a 13-page body. We should hold a 15-minute stand-up meeting today. Who cares? Like, really?
It will change everything.
It might not work. It might not be very successful.
Or it might work. Who knows, right? But maybe a 15-minute stand-up meeting is the way to go for this situation. Probably not. Or it might be a little more sophisticated than that. But anyways, so this, I think, is the issue, right? Is having a better understanding, having a better appreciation, and even just knowing your options. Like it's interesting when we'll train we'll train like existing senior Scrum coaches or senior Scrum Masters or whatever they are, and very often we'll I'm not doing as much training anymore, but I used to do a fair bit, and every so often you'd get some Scrum Master was forced to go, right? The team is going on the DA training, and the expert, the local expert's being forced to go, and they're sitting there like this, like, you can't possibly teach me anything because I'm awesome. Okay, fine, whatever. And literally at the end of the first day, every single time I've had somebody with that attitude at the 9 a.m. on the first day. By the end of the first day, they're coming up and saying, "Oh my God, I had no idea that there were solutions for some of these issues that we've been struggling with for months. And not only are there solutions, but there's multiple choices." Yeah, I know, no kidding. How about that?
Yeah.
Who would have guessed?
But I get similar reactions because 50% of my training just deal with human beings and human behavior and psychology and psychosociology. So they're like, oh, that's why. Okay. So,
yeah. You mean somebody studied this? Yeah, there's people have earned.
Ever heard of Tuckman?
How about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that would have been maybe a nice addition. I'll share a story. I coach a team in a large financial institution, a bank. Actually, it's not a bank; it's a financial institution. We're not allowed to call it a bank. We get in trouble when we call it a bank. And this team, on average, started programming professionally in 1983. I'm not going to tell them to do Scrum, for crying out loud. No. I just sat down in a room with these guys and girls, they're both, and I said, what do you want to do? I said, the only constraint, okay, and basically I just pick one out of a hat, basically. I said, the only constraint is quick feedback. What do you want to try?
We could try this. Radical. Yeah.
Sorry?
That could actually be a radical change for them.
Thankfully it went well. They appreciate it because they went through so many different methodologies throughout their
they're burned out
40 years of experience. I'm not going to tell them to do Scrum or Kanban or anything. Basically, and they basically together we built a thing that Scrum-ish. And we had 1 hour daily synchronizations, I guess. 1 hour every day. Sure, why not? And this was not
works.
this we were not confined at that point. We were still working. This was pre-COVID, and so yeah, sure, whatever. And then they reduced it. I said, what if what if we reach the same result? Okay, but in 30 minutes instead of 60. You guys interested? Yeah, sure, yeah. So if you allow me, we'll create. I just said we'll do a parking lot, and the people that are concerned with this specific subject will do that. But what I could have done is maybe print out concepts of DA and leave them lying around, and they could reference it and say, yeah, maybe we should do inceptions. Yeah, inception sounds good. Yeah, we should try that, so on and so forth. And maybe give them like a buffet of possibilities.
Yeah.
Does that make sense, Scott?
Yeah, and you can guide them along too, right? Because it's also, when they're talking about something and, oh yeah, that's that's an architecture issue. Mm-hmm. Well, with that much experience in the team, the problem's going to be, they'll be, sharing war stories forever. But it's just, that'll be an easier team. Might be an easier team to coach, because all you got to do is say, yeah, sounds like we have an architecture problem. Wonder what we should do about that. And there's probably enough expertise there to do that. And maybe there's not. And if there isn't, then bring the toolkit up. Because so like I said earlier, the toolkit's based on like different levels of expertise, right? If you're expert in that, then maybe at best you need like a checklist. Just I remember that technique. Yeah, well, let me tell you about this. Blah 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 blah. And then because
that's the way we used to do it,
so they've forgotten about it. Right?
And that's the way we used to do it. I hear that often.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And they just forgotten about it. Or I'm allowed to do that. Yeah, I thought this was agile, right? So I thought we could only do post-it notes. So there'll be that sort of stuff going on. Whereas if it was a team of newbies, or if there were some newbies and the newbies might need a little more guidance, right? Whereas the expert people, they just need a little bit of a prod, and boom, they're off and running. So it really does depend. Mm-hmm. Is the situation. Absolutely, and as a good coach, you've got to know what it depends on, and then how to prod people, right? And that's not something that a junior coach is going to know, right? So as a more senior coach, you just inherently know this. The more junior folks aren't going to know that. But at the same time too, you've got to have enough expertise to know, it sounded like an architecture problem, right? Mm-hmm. Bing. You might not have that. So these are
solutions that exist.
Yeah. This is one of the things you get in the DA training, is that you see, well, wait a minute, there's a wider range of stuff out there than just user stories and epics and post-it notes. So I think, and it's just this eye-opening thing. And it gets back to my earlier point, where we get these experienced Scrum people, and they've been doing a great job for years. But then suddenly it's like, oh yeah, you're welcome to, you're now thinking outside of the Scrum box, and look, there's this wealth of material out there that you'd never even heard about and hadn't thought about, right? And it's like, I didn't even know there's solutions to these problems that we've had for years. And
Mathieu, I'll ask us a question. Let's get some pre-consulting services there from Scott Ambler. Typical problems that we run into when we're coaching various teams. Let's think of these large corporations, insurance, financial, banks, so on and so forth. Not the small ones is different. Well, yeah, I guess it is different.
It doesn't matter, small, large.
But let's say
you're doing. Yeah.
Current issues that I might have is, they're doing Scrum.
Yeah.
And, but it's specialties. They're not really a team. There's 5 team members and there's 4 specialties, expertise, and they all work on their thing.
Within the team, right?
Yeah, within the group of individuals that we might call a team. In some companies, maybe even call it a squad. But anyways, what would DA say about this, or recommend, or put forth?
Yeah. So first thing, I would consider the life cycle, right? So you say you're doing Scrum, so you've got this. So basically, you've got a team of 5 people. but there's 4 different categories of work, basically.
Yeah, I don't know what Mathieu is
DBA,
working on.
QA, and
Mathieu is working on
developers.
Kix. Mathieu is working on Kix. Never heard of it. I'm working on Java stuff, and they just assembled us. Yeah, it's linked in some way.
So it's 4 different people working on like 1 or 2 features, and it's like I do my thing, I hand it off to the next person, they do their thing. Is that the sort of situation?
Not even. No, it's a high level migration to the cloud initiative, so on and so forth.
So then I pull something out, I do all the work, get it done, and then
put it
for a sprint, I'm done,
somewhere.
And I don't have the reflex to go help my colleague because I've never done that part of that migration stuff. It's still part of the overall mission, but I don't do that. I might even break something, maybe not. I know I'm allowed. I mean, the Scrum Master said I'm allowed to go help Mary on her Kix thing. But I'm just going to work on the next thing on the product backlog in preparation for the next sprint.
And maybe the Scrum Master just forced me to help my colleague because it put some kind of whip limit or something on my side to minimize my.
So maybe they should be, not knowing the situation well. My first reaction is maybe they should be doing something like Kanban rather than Scrum. Like, it really is 4 or 5 different people pretty much doing their own thing, and they're a team because they were sitting together in the same set of cubicles or something. Then it does, well, it's not really a team, but we'll pretend they are. Yeah. And it sounds more like a Kanban thing, right? Like you pull your own little chunk of work in, do it. Maybe I reach out for some help because there is some Kix stuff. So, hey, Mary, help me with Kix because I'm don't have a clue. But then we get it done and we move on, right? So.
Yeah. So maybe,
so right now, it's probably the wrong life cycle. Yeah. Although that can be a bit traumatic, changing the life cycle. It could also be an issue of like, why don't they want to work together? Is it like, is there time pressure? Are they, you got to get stuff out the door, so we're not going to work together?
The scientific term is immunity to change.
Okay, they just so they're happy doing what they want to do.
And it's too scary. It hurts them not doing what they're comfortable with. Physically hurt them. Yeah.
So the DA philosophy is to start where you are, to do the best that you can in the situation that you face, and always try to get better. So I would start looking for things that they're comfortable with changing. Yeah. So are they comfortable with maybe picking up some testing skills, or maybe there's a new skill that none of them have across this team. Maybe we can go learn this together. And so maybe there's like no UI skills here, right? And then their UI work is a bit challenging. So you know what? Let's learn something about UI, and let's work together to solve a problem that none of us are really good at. But it's still obviously has some business value, needs to be done. And that'll be the challenge, finding something like that, or maybe not, who knows.
But I assume DA doesn't go into that level of detail. What I mean is that level of detail where you go into documentation and they give you a scenario where you have a team, quote unquote, where there's very, very specific specializations without that team, and
at the present moment we don't. That's something that's underway. We've purposely for years made a conscious decision to leave a lot of coaching and people advice out, specifically because everybody else in the industry was focusing on that. And not really focusing on process.
And the scenarios are endless. I mean,
yeah. The scenario, the people-oriented scenarios tend to be endless, but so are the process-oriented scenarios as well, right? Yeah. So I would start looking for, like I said, sounds like they're following the wrong life cycle. But it's also, that can be traumatic, or maybe not, right? I would at least pitch it to the team, right? And if I'd been with the team for a while, I would have a good sense, they're not going to like this idea. I still might pitch it anyways, because you never know. Yeah. But yeah, I would consider experimenting with the life cycle. I would also consider, like I said, looking for more. Are these technically oriented people, or are they business oriented? So they're technical oriented.
Oh yeah, the technology. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so I would start looking for some technical issues that, and if I've got good, if I've got good testers, what themes are coming back from testing that, we're not doing that well at. So if it's UI, if it's security, if it's something, I would be looking for a common problem that we're not good at.
Mm-hmm.
And then I start looking for technique. Hey, we're not that good at security. Hey, let's go look at the, let's go look at the security process blade and see what it has to say. Oh yeah, here's some techniques. Anybody know it? Nobody. Maybe we should learn about these. So we go learn it first to solve a real problem. This whatever the security issue is.
Yeah.
And second, get them working and learning together. So now you've got a little bit of coaching expertise, like knowledge and experience. But so using the toolkit to leverage, to improve your coaching.
Yeah, I could add layers of complexity because actually Kanban was actually something that I said, maybe we should just forget. The goal is no longer a sprint. The goal is the ticket.
Yeah,
that's so basically stay in your expertise, stay in your swim lane, expertise swim lane, and we'll go with that. But then you have upper management says no. We want redundancy. We only have one Kicks expert, one Mendix expert. And the goal to going with Scrum is to force people to trade, to cross-contaminate in terms of expertise and work together so we can have redundancy so that when Bob takes his retirement, because the COBOL programmer is like 1 foot in the grave, he's out soon. That's the goal. So, oh man, okay. So, all right. So if you're doing succession planning around Kicks and COBOL and good stuff like that, then you need to start investing in that. So, are you setting the team off in COBOL training? Are you setting off in Kicks training? Right? Because it's not just about pairing. You're not going to learn Kicks by pairing every so often with Mary or whoever that person was that knows Kicks. Or COBOL or whatever, right? This is something you need training. You're gonna, probably multiple, training over time. Certainly pairing, certainly, throw them in on a real effort, COBOL effort, and force the issue. But if that's uncomfortable, you also, you risk losing, your Kicks person, the Kicks person probably knows COBOL, but pretty hard to find a Kicks person that doesn't. But you'll lose the Mendix person because you forced them to learn that evil Kicks thing. Or you'll lose the Kicks person because they had to learn that evil Mendix thing. Yeah. Then you have to move on to extreme COBOL. So you gotta do test-driven COBOL.
There is. There is.
There is.
Yeah, there's.
I never heard of it. I'm learning new stuff there.
There are testing tools for COBOL, and there's a COBOL unit test tool.
Wow!
Like 5 people worldwide, but still, I don't know. I'm making that number up, but I'm probably not far off. Might be 6.
We need to invite the extreme programming dude.
Yeah.
Maybe you can tell us.
You know what? Hunt down some COBOL. Agile COBOL developers. Like that would be an interesting, what the heck is going on there? They're out there.
Oh, wow. Maybe on our sister podcast, Sprinkler Techno, where they just talk about technology stuff, and I'll probably leave that to them. Mathieu, you asked really good questions. I wanna hear your next amazing question.
Yeah, but I just want to maybe play your game, Eric, and some kind of mise en situation like you, but in big company right now, as you explained, Eric, on my side, the problem that I see more often is we have a lot of dependencies between team and we want to manage it and we don't know what to do with. And often we use some kind of PI planning. Another time we use a lot of different techniques. But if I take your toolkit with DA, how could I start to solve that kind of problem?
Do we manage dependencies or do we detangle dependencies? Which of the, or
That's
yes.
right.
Where should I start?
Either one. So we give options, right? We don't tell you thou shalt detangle or thou shalt manage. We say, hey, you know what? You've got dependencies. You might want to do this. 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 Here are the trade-offs. What do you think is, because I don't know your situation. Fundamentally, I don't know your situation, right? So I can't tell you what to do. And yes, the frameworks and the methods, they do that. But honestly, I can't do that. Sorry, that's not honest. Right. But what I can do is say, here's your choices, here's some good options. And here are the trade-offs because you know the situation you can probably choose what's best for you. And you also know the people, right? Because it's all, what could you possibly do? Because you might have like 5 or 6 options. 3 of them would probably work, make sense for your situation. But given the people you've got, only 2 now are all viable options, because that one is like way too complicated or way too sophisticated for at the current level, right? A year or 2 from now, maybe not today. So fair enough, right? And this is the other problem too with the methods or the frameworks. They've got great techniques in them, but you might not have the skills. Like I assume you're familiar with XP. There's a collection of awesome techniques. One of them is TDD. Come on, right? Like, how many people do you honestly know that are fairly decent at test-driven development? Yeah, there's some, but most people struggle with it, right?
Yeah.
So telling people, oh yeah, just go off and do a combination of Scrum and XP, when they have they're nowhere near that level of skill. 1 or 2 people on the team might be, most of them aren't. Most of them could probably get there with help, with training, with coaching, with time, with pairing or mobbing, or any sort of non-solo thing. But it's an investment in your people. It's including time and money. Are you willing to make that? More than likely not. Right. I'm sure, and management always gives a really good, rah, we love our people. Oh, but by the way, your training budget's almost nothing. So, but good luck. Right. So maybe next year,
This is the Scott I was looking for. Yeah, I love it.
So this is the thing, right? Because you've got to be realistic. It's like, so it gets back to the DA philosophy of do the best that you can in the situation that you face and always try to get better. Right. So right now you have a certain level of ability and knowledge and skills. You can stretch, you can learn, you can improve without a doubt, but you can't go from here to here instantaneously. Right. So, if most teams, it's hard to convince the programmers to test coherently, let alone do TDD. Right. So, it's like, let's get better at testing. Let's improve this, do this. And then a year or 2 from now, maybe we'll be at the TDD level. Right. But can't go from here to here instantly, right? So, and this is the problem. And I love XP, don't get me wrong, but this is the problem with some of the methods, right? Like some of the more sophisticated ones have really good techniques, but which might work for you at some point, but just not now. You just aren't there. Or maybe, and they also have great techniques in them that you just don't need, and you will never need. At least in the current situation you're in. Maybe a few years from now, when you change teams, maybe TDD is will be the saving grace for your team. Right now, you're in a situation where TDD is really not there. It's not going to, even if you had the skills, it wouldn't matter. It just isn't appropriate.
Yeah,
makes sense.
I have another question that came to me while you are speaking about the TDD and all the concept of the toolbox. So that toolbox is pretty rich, and there's a lot of tools right now in there. And how do you maintain that toolbox? Because maybe on my side, in my big financial institution, or I don't know, I just create a new, let's call it a NAT meeting. It's some new kind of PI planning-ish something there. And maybe there's a lot of good idea. If I want to contribute and say, hey, Scott, look at that, maybe in that kind of situation, blah, 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 we could use that new tool. How could I share it through DA to the world?
Yeah, so getting it out there in the world, one of our people will probably notice it. But the way it works right now is we have a small team at PMI, we call them the DA IP team. And we work, we basically maintain and evolve the toolkit. We work with a group of advisors who feed us a bunch of great ideas. We also work with organizations where, we get asked questions or we get brought in, help us solve this problem. It's sort of like the type of questions I've been getting here, except with more time and more detail and more specifics. That sort of stuff. So then, because sometimes we'll go, "Ooh, yeah, we're sort of missing that," or it's like, "Yeah, that's on our backlog, but way back there, we better move that up, because that happens too, right? So and then we get random ideas coming in. What I want to do, and we're not there yet, and we would have been there, but COVID, usual stuff. So is get the volunteers. So the PMI has this phenomenal volunteer force, and the issue is one of the good news is that we have this phenomenal group of people that can feed us ideas. The problem is it's completely overwhelming. Okay. So it's like drinking from a fire hose. So and the problem is that I'm waiting to set up a small team that can filter, work with volunteers to filter it out and like narrow it down to something that's just merely a garden hose rather than a fire hose. And and we were in the process of doing that about a year ago, and then COVID hit. And,
Daniel Gagnon will do it. You can ask him.
Yeah, actually, yeah. Well, Daniel's on our board of advisors, right? So
I figured,
he keeps great ideas all the time. Yeah. But just don't let him hear that I said that, though. So.
Well, I actually hosted a panel, and Daniel Gagnon was there. And was all DA stuff. And who else was there? I forget. Bill Brantley?
Sounds familiar. Yeah, there's a lot of DA
and Karen Lewis. They were part of the panel.
Yeah.
It was fun. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, was it Brent Reed you were thinking about?
No, Bill Brantley. He applied DA in a military context.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Oh, cool.
And Karen, I forget. I think it was financial.
Yeah, she's financial.
Yeah. Mathieu?
Yeah, sorry. So to my question, and how can I contribute to that to that wonderful toolbox that are DA? At some point, we could submit idea, and there will be a board. People will discriminate which idea are great or not, and how can they be added to that toolbox?
So what we do is we want to hear. It has to get through. In some ways, it has to get through the Scott filter, because
still, really.
Well, yeah, and I appreciate that I'm a bottleneck as a result, but it ends up, and I'm trying to and I'm expanding the filter people as well through training and coaching and mentoring right now. But the challenge becomes, I worked with the RUP team years ago. I worked outside of the RUP team and in the RUP team for a while. And unfortunately, even though that was phenomenal, for all the, for how much RUP gets beaten up, it was an incredible thing. It really was. If you used it properly. It was almost always abused for many reasons, but
we could do a whole other podcast just on that.
Yeah. And but the challenge was from a process development point of view, is it became a dumping ground. And this is my terms, it's not their terms, but in my mind, it became a dumping ground that they just kept putting stuff into it. And it was good stuff in its own context, but it didn't fit together as much as well as it could have. Mm-hmm. And people perceived it, even though the messaging was very clear to take what you need and no more, you take from the RUP what you need and use it that way. It was almost always perceived as we have to do all of this, right? And that was the problem. And so what happened was, all the stuff was constantly being put into it. And there's stuff that they tried to put in that I pushed back when I could, but easier said than done though. But the problem was that it got out of control towards the end, and I'm desperately trying to avoid that. So basically the criteria that I look for is, ideally I want to have done it myself, or at least know people done that, can talk to them and coherently discuss, tell me about mob programming, right? So mob programming, there's a classic one. So it took about 2 years to get mob program, 2 or 3 years probably, to get mob programming into DA. And I knew Woody, I'd been looking at mob programming and been hearing about it, but I hadn't seen it in practice. Mm-hmm. And And even though Woody had very coherent stories, and I believe everything he said, I wanted to hear it. Yeah, one of my criteria is I want to hear from not the creator. Hearing from the creator is great.
A little bias,
but there may be some bias.
It could be.
But hearing from the not creator, and preferably several different examples, is the way to go. And better yet, actually applying it myself, or at least working with people who are applying it at the present moment. So I waited. We waited for a couple of years to bring mob programming in, because I wanted to see enough evidence that first it was real, not a fad, because there's a lot of fad stuff going on in the Agile community. Remember the Nokia test? Oh, anyways, yeah. Or remember fail fast? Oh, wait, no, we're still doing fail fast. So it's not
checkbox agile. I love checkbox agile. It's fantastic.
Yeah. So anyway, so there's all these fads, right? So fair enough. So it's got to get through the fad period.
Yeah.
Either it's got to be phenomenally blatantly obvious, or it's got to, I want to wait to get to the fad period. So mob programming fell into I want to wait to see this get out of the fad, fad part of the life cycle. And it actually wasn't until I talked to several people who've been applying it, and could say it and walk me through the trade, what was working well, what was not working so well, where they tried it, what worked, what didn't work, why, what they're doing now, what they learned, are they still doing it? Those are the types of things too, right? Yeah, because if you only tried it once, if you tried it, and better yet, if you tried it, it didn't work out so well the first time, but you're trying it again because you get a sense that this should have worked, but I just blew it for whatever reason, then fine, right? If you're still at it. That's a very good sign.
It's a good sign for sure.
Yeah, very good. Yeah.
We want to scoop, Scott.
Yeah.
What are those things that you're observing right now that you're asking yourself? Is it fads, or is it will it stand the test of time, and we might include into DA in the future?
In the PR process of DA.
Yeah. So that's a good question. Yeah, I'm not gonna go there. Yeah.
So close. If we had scotch, in this podcast, we would have added
maybe.
That.
Yeah.
Or maybe something that you rejected, something that you say, oh no, that will never be part of it.
We've rejected. I don't want to say rejected. So I always like beating up on earned value management, but we haven't rejected that though. So this is something that's unusual about DA, which can confuse some people, is that we include reasonably bad practice, or practices that don't work out so well usually. I don't want to label it as a good practice or a bad practice. So so EVM is a classic example, earned value management. It does make sense in a few situations. It's generally an overhead, is a very polite way of saying it. But there are a few situations where earned value management does in fact make sense, and I would recommend it. There are a large number of situations where I see it get applied, and I would not recommend it because it is a blatantly obviously a bad idea. And that's okay, right? So what happens is some of the practices, or some of the decision points, I should say, are what we call ordered. So for example, where does earned value management lie? I can't remember now, anyways. But we'll have a decision point where it's ordered, and what we're basically saying there is that the strategies towards the top of the list are generally more effective than the strategies towards the bottom of the list. So people will say, well, why would you include the ones in the bottom of the list? Well, that might be the best that you can do right now. And the strategies towards the top of the list might not be options. It just might not be options, period. Right? So for example, EVM is mandated by the US federal government in many situations. So is it a great technique? Doesn't matter. It's the only technique you can do. Done. End of story. Right? It's mandated. You're out of luck on that one. Yeah. So do it as best you can, right? That's the best you can do in the situation that you face, because you happen to be on that type of a project that insists on that technique. And you can complain all you want, but that's the reality on the ground. So things don't get rejected. Now, so if something is a true fad, so say mob programming, say it burned out, right? More than likely it would never have gotten the toolkit, but it didn't burn out. And it's actually a pretty darn good technique. But so it, it's and it actually appears in several places because it's a technique that can be used for architecture, can be used for programming, can be used for architecture, design, learning. Because you could use all the non-solo techniques
you could use it in HR or finance. You can use it in any context, basically.
Well, so mob programming is an instance of now I'm going to process wonk land, but it's an instance of non-solo work, right? So it's the non-solo work is like more than one person working together, collaborating together. Yeah. So in some ways, mob programming isn't the greatest name because it's far more than just programming, right? It's groups of people working together, learning together. They happen to be getting something done, but they're really also thinking and learning and sharing while they're doing it.
Co-creation. There you go. There's a name for it.
Co-creation, yeah. But it doesn't roll off the tongue, right? So there's the marketing issue as well, right? So
we can invent a word.
The mob programming is a great name for getting attention, whereas the co-creation framework, maybe not. Yeah. So, or co-creation development working thingy, whatever name you can spend. Yeah, it's not gonna be that interesting. Yeah. So that becomes the issue. So anyways, if mob programming had burned out and disappeared, then it wouldn't hit the toolkit. But it did, and it does. And same thing with EVM, right? So if EVM had burned out, obviously it didn't, but if it would have been the same thing. Now EVM tends to not do so well in the listings just because of the nature of EVM. Yeah. But like I said, in some situations, it is the best option you have available to you. And not just because it's been mandated. There are some situations where EVM does, in fact, make a lot of sense and does, in fact, bring a lot of value.
It's a good communication tool with the upper management. I mean, are you going to talk in points? No.
Yeah, well,
maybe if you're talking CPI and SPIs, maybe you can have a proper conversation and increase your credibility. Going back to the beginning of the conversation,
and and that's it too, right? So what would you do if you're coaching into a more traditional organization? They're currently doing EVM, and they're doing CPI and SPI and ESPI. I can't remember what it is now, but there's a couple other PIs, right? Yeah. So CPI and SPI are the two critical ones, and so this is how they're talking. They believe in this. They've drunk that Kool-Aid, whatever, right? You have zero hope of interacting with them until you can speak that language, and you can speak intelligently to, well, maybe this, maybe you've noticed that this isn't working out so well, right? And hey, have you ever noticed that, blah, 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 right? Oh, yeah. It's like 99% of our projects, that happens. Well, here's why. And maybe we can do something about that. And so here's this other strategy. So you can start inching them out of, because if you try, we just got to do stories and burn down charts now. They're gonna laugh you out of the room. Conversation's over, right? Yeah. Oh yeah, the agile kitties. Yeah, interesting ideas. Doesn't work here because it's too complicated for agile, right? And the conversation's over.
Yeah, at least it increases the risk of the conversation being over for sure. Sure, absolutely. Is there a lot of human-related stuff in DA?
There is, and we're working on more. So like I said earlier, we have a fair bit of teaming stuff. We've got roles stuff. We actually had a really coherent. All based on extreme programming. Yeah, you just flashed the book a while ago. The rights and responsibilities from XP, we extended them very slightly, probably about 10 years ago, because that was coherent, man. If you take a look, particularly, I think it was in the first edition of the book.
This is second.
Second edition.
They still have gummy bears in here? I don't know. I forget.
I don't even remember. Yeah, but they had a really coherent sets of rights. Actually, it might have been the Ron Jeffries book that they had that in. Okay. I can't remember. Anyways, it doesn't matter. But XP was very clear on rights and responsibilities, which was a phenomenally important thing in a lot of organizations. And it's unfortunate that a lot of people have forgotten this, but it's not as common as it used to be, I think. But anyways, so yeah, but yeah, we are expanding on it. We have a people management, because I just will not use the term HR. We have a people management process blade. We have actually explicit support for diversity and inclusion and diversity and inclusion. We've had that for a long time, actually, but we fleshed that out a bit more just recently. Actually, and we fleshed out. We're still in the process of fleshing out metric stuff. We've got a very, very comprehensive approach to metrics, and getting better, all based on some sort of outcomes or a goal-driven approach. So if you're a GQM or an OKR shop, then they're basically the same fundamental strategy. Because it's interesting when you'll see all these like top 10 metrics lists, right? Come on, right? It kills me that the industry's talking about like OKR and sometimes GQM, but okay, take an outcome-driven approach, which means your metrics have got to be driven based on, or whatever outcomes you're trying to achieve, that drives your choice of metrics. Good, right? That's the fundamental concept. And then 5 seconds later, they're talking about, and here's our top 10 metrics list. What? Did you? It's not even coherent.
Right hand, left hand.
Together. Come on, right? It's like, if you want to, So anyway, so we take an outcome-driven approach. Like, there's like 14 outcomes, or common outcomes. Like, I want to improve quality, I want to improve staff morale, I want to improve this, I want to improve that. And here's like 7 or 8 things. If you want to improve staff morale, those are the sorts of things I might want to measure. And so pick 2 or 3, right? I want to improve quality. Oh, here's like 50 different things. I don't know if 50 is probably close to that. Pick from here, right? Yeah, I actually broke the quality stuff up into data quality, software quality, general quality, because the list was way too long. And frankly, there's data specific stuff and software specific stuff and general stuff. For quality.
I'll go somewhere else for a minute, because I really wanted to get this question in. I have a pet peeve. I have many pet peeves, but this is one of them. New terms being invented, then taken over by a large organization usually, and they completely change the meaning. Examples: stories. Now, everything in a backlog, backlog for one, but everything in a backlog are stories, but they're not stories. They're just requirements. They're just connect database. Everything's called stories. Points, obviously, points are just basically hours now in many places. So why don't just call them hours instead of points? I don't know.
PI planning, it's called for every kind of meeting. There's more than 10 people in that meeting.
As soon as you're more than 10 people, it's called a PI planning, which I don't think. And the one that's coming up more and more often, we often relate inception to DA. Congratulations. That's often put together.
Should be really rough, but that's okay.
No, you can take it. It's all yours. But now these meetings that last half an hour, they call it inception meetings. I'm like, I don't think this is what Scott had in mind in terms of inception. One of the worst ones lately is story mapping, because Jira created a new plugin for story mapping. Some product owners are using it just to sort their backlog items that they call stories that they're not. And they say, look, I did story mapping. That's not story mapping, dude. Stop it. So I want to know, Scott, in regards to DA, what are some of those terms that we tend to associate with DA, like inception, that you notice that people completely change the meaning of it?
Well, welcome to the English language is always my first response to that. Nothing you can do. Get used to it. So we're really careful about language, and because we try to be agnostic, which is next to impossible, right? So because the problem is the terminology, like whatever term you use, you start marrying to this, you're basically married to the source of that. So so earlier I said we adopted the term inception from Rob, because they had actually had a fairly decent term there. Now, I could have called it initiation. We could have called it, startup or start or ideate. And there's more to inception.
I think 20 years ago, you talked about sprint -1. Is that possible?
Yeah.
That's a long time ago. That's part of my brain just lit up here.
Well, sprint 0, right? Yeah, you got to start. You got to start going backwards tells you they didn't think the method through. But and that's okay, right? So for example, we use the term iteration rather than sprint because we're desperately trying to help people think outside of the Scrum box. Now, but the problem is that sprint has now been almost universally adopted by all these methods. But now you're totally locked into that. Like, remember earlier we were talking about that team that thought it was a Scrum team, but was probably really a Kanban team, but they're probably still screwing around with sprints because they didn't know any better. So you get your Scrum blinders on, right? Because of the terminology, and because you only know that terminology, you only know to go look for things based on that term, right? So you won't think about searching on so say you're struggling with requirements problems, you won't think you'll start thinking about I got to search on stories because everything's a story, right? Everything's a story, right? So you'll miss non-functional requirements, perhaps, right? And you won't even know to search for it. Like, this is the problem now, right? I'm sure you're working with some of the younger crowd, and you'll use this old term like quality of service requirement or non-functional requirement or kicks or something, and they won't have a clue what you're talking about because it's dropped out of the language because they've got this very narrow viewpoint. So we want to we're careful with the terminology. We try to be as agnostic as we possibly can, and the problem is once you start using the Scrum terminology, you're no longer agnostic. Right. So I hear a lot of people think, well, we're agnostic, and they start talking about sprints. Look up the word agnostic, please. Right. Look up the word. You're not agnostic if you're using this terminology, because now you're boxing yourself in. You don't even know it. And this is the problem, right? So this is the problem. And you went through several symptoms of people not knowing, like only knowing a certain set of terminology, right? So you got this longer running meeting. Well, that must be a PI planning meeting because that's the only thing they know, right? And their terminology no longer allows them to think coherently, right? So this is why the toolkit helps you break out of this box, right? Because if you only know these terms like sprint and PI planning and some of these common agile terms, then you'll never search out, those are the terms you search on, and you'll get this narrow body of knowledge based on that terminology, and you'll miss the wealth that's out there because you never knew about it, right? So so you got to be the weird terminology stuff is a symptom of the overall problem of these prescriptive methods have forced us into this box. So look at like intro to agile training now. It's basically the CSM workshop, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
How sad is that? It's homogenous.
That's just Scrum took over the world, that's for sure.
Yeah. You should be worried. You should be very seriously worried about that.
And why did they take over the world? Because it's extremely simple.
Yeah, simple.
Management.
It's a story that everybody wants to hear.
This should have taken over the world, but nobody in management understands this. Nobody.
I don't think they understand Scrum either, but that's another issue. But
at least they think they understand it. They didn't even pretend to understand this.
There was two problems with XP.
Instead of this.
There's two fundamental problems with XP. The first one was it required skill. The second one was the name. Extreme programming. Right? That's we don't need any of that extreme programming. We got enough of that already. No, you don't. You don't even know what you're talking about because they don't know the language, right? So, but it required skill, whereas other methods, it's really about running meetings.
Yep.
Really? So, not quite that hard. Years ago, so earlier we were talking about how I used to do the research for Dr. Dobbs, and I did did on my own too after that. But I ran a couple surveys years ago, basically asking people about agile adoption was the general topic. And so what practices were easy to adopt, what practices not so easy to adopt, what added value, what didn't add value, those sorts of questions. And it was interesting, all the Scrum practices were found to be really easy to adopt. All the, some of the XP practices like TDD and pairing and others were difficult to adopt. And Of course. Yeah. I can't teach you, like, it takes, you could, sure, you can do a 2 or 3 day TDD course, but you are barely a novice coming out of an intense 3-day TDD course.
Absolutely.
You need years of experience to be good at it, right? Because it's a heck of a skill, and fair enough, right? So of course it's hard to adopt, of course, because it is hard to adopt. It's the nature of that skill, and you're not gonna pick it up quickly, even though I think it's probably one of the more important skills a programmer should have. But certainly up there.
Yeah, absolutely. Mathieu?
Well,
putting you on the spot, Mathieu.
Yeah. Where are we?
We were talking about the book, Executive Guide to Disciplined Agile.
Yeah, but the first question that came to my mind is, if you had to imagine what will be DA in, let's say, 5 or 10 years, what will look like? Where would it be?
I suspect it'll look it'll be expanded. So we're basically fleshing out details right now. I'm sure that there'll be a few topics that we've missed. Although I don't have anything on my radar at the present moment. Oh, actually, no, I shouldn't say that. So, this might not ever get it. So we certainly don't have a lot of information right now about physical construction. Right.
Yeah.
And fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. Right. Yeah. And that's something. Business operations as well. We're still weak on. So and there's a heck of a wealth of knowledge around operations management and stuff like that. We just haven't gotten around to leveraging it yet. So so we're fleshing things out. So I think that'll continue, and everything continually evolves, right? So tomorrow somebody will come up with a new technique that's like mob plus programming, mob plus plus. There we go, and it'll be a valid technique, and then that'll appear in the toolkit a couple of years later once it's proven itself. So so that sort of thing will be constantly happening, and certainly more examples. I want to flesh out. I want more videos. We're very short on video stuff. Because I think most people learn these days from videos, not from reading. Yeah,
these short 2-minute capsules.
Quick clip.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's TDD in 5 minutes. How hard could that be to make?
And you get your certification. It's fantastic.
TDD for the C-level.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
You mentioned physical construction.
Yeah.
What are you referring to? Like construction?
Yeah, like buildings, right? So there's a heck of a wealth of knowledge there, right? So that's something that PMI in general is doing. Maybe that'll end up in the DA toolkit one day. Who knows?
There's a website called Agile BIM, BIM.
Yeah,
it's all about agile and construction.
Yeah. It's I actually my wife and I are almost finished building a cottage using a hybrid agile approach. Really? We started with a traditional approach and it crashed and burned. So we end up with we pretty much finished. Yeah, it's the type of thing you never quite finished, right? But we're at the 99% point right now.
Oh,
and
wow.
We finished it with an agile, hybrid agile strategy.
Don't forget to include a video production also in your next version. Because I started a new company with my daughter where we produce quick ads, and we're actually using an agile approach. Usually the approach based on my daughter, she took training, in that. Yeah. It's creating all the content, then going into editing. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to film this. And I want to bring it, I want to color grade it, I want to edit it I want it completely done before we move on to the next part. It's like, you can't do that. Yeah, that's where I want to do that.
Yeah. Video is exactly software, right?
And that's exactly how Pixar doing their movie. And that's described in the other book's name.
I know what you mean. I know
Well,
what
then
you're talking
creative
about.
something, but that describe how Pixar to do it, and they produce their movie exactly like that.
Include the client in the process, and he or she gives us input for the dailies. Actually, you're using the term dailies in a completely different context. It's fantastic.
So here's an idea that I'll leave you with to think about. But one of the things that I like to distinguish. So when I look at processes and techniques and stuff like that, one of the questions I ask myself is this for tangible things or intangible things? And what I mean by that is if it's tangible, you're dealing with atoms. So you're building buildings, you're building roads. If it's intangible, you're dealing with bits. So you're making a video, you're writing software, you're writing a book, you're writing, it's out there.
It's easier to redo and
refactoring is easier, I'm sure.
And that to me, well, you can refactor with physical stuff, which we found out with building the house. But
Olympic Stadium is being refactored every 2 years.
So anyway, I'll finish the tangible. So the rules are very different in the tangible world than in the intangible world. And this to me is probably the major issue when distinguishing between approaches. So I would not want to have an approach that is appropriate for intangible stuff like pure Scrum, try to build a building with that. Not going to work out so well. I would also be phenomenally reticent to use a process that works well for tangible, like building a bridge, and then applying it to the software world. And that was the fundamental problem with the waterfall stuff, right? So
even the terminology is taken from the tangible realm.
Yeah, exactly.
Cahier des charges, I remember, in the term in French.
It's all. So I find it's easier to think about techniques in those terms, right? Because then techniques that appear to be a really phenomenally bad idea from a software point of view make a heck of a lot of sense for building a building, because you're dealing with atoms, you're not dealing with bits, and vice versa. So
emergent architecture, building a bridge, that would be interesting.
But probably they do it during the architecture phase. They probably do some kind of emergent architecture.
There is actually, because you're drilling holes, you're looking to see what's actually underground, because that's always a mystery until you get there. But even when we're building the cottage, which is, it's really, we call it cottage, it's really our retirement home. But it was interesting. So my wife is a landscape architect. We know architect, like some really good architects. So she's got an architecture background. I've got at least a software architecture background. But when I was a kid in school, I took drafting and because I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, right? So and drafting is very interesting. But anyway, so I took draft. So I sort of had a clue, right? So I can read blueprints, so which blew her mind because she didn't expect that, right? So when we were in the architecture phase for the house, it was they would her and the architect would roll out blueprints, and then expecting to have to explain it to me. Oh, well, wait a minute. And so anyway, so we planned it all out. We, talked with experts and all that sort of stuff, right? So we really thought things through. So we had the house built. It was built in a factory. It's built in a factory, and then, dropped on, in two big pieces, dropped onto the foundations. And then, a little bit of framing had to occur to, bolt together and all sorts of stuff. So basically, we thought everything through, right? Because it's one of those things, it's out in the middle of nowhere, right? So any changes is a really big decision.
I can imagine.
So anyway, so we had the house dropped on. We were in the basement. So the basement was 3 walls were cement because it was in the side of a hill, and then the front wall facing the lake was boards, right? Just the 2x4. So that present, and then the windows were framed in. So we're both standing in the basement, and both of us thinking the exact same thing. Neither one of us saying what we're thinking, right? Because we knew it was a really horrifying suggestion. And what it was we were missing a window. And we had thought this through. We'd worked with an architect. We went back and forth, all this upfront planning, blah, 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 blah. House is in place. Oh yeah. The front siding was, it was more than boards. Yeah, it was boards plus the facing stuff was on. So now we were in expensive change land, and we're
just do a
both
change request.
Yeah, just issue a change request. How yeah, put in a JIRA ticket, right? How hard can that be? So, and we're both looking at that, and we both turned to, we need a window there, and we at the same time. So anyway, so requirements change. Even building a house, requirements change, and that it was unfortunate that we came up with that observation when we did, but at least it was still changeable. Very painful.
And it was the only way you could have that revelation is by being in the building at that moment. There's no other way in hell you would have had it.
Yeah. So basically, even though the house at that point was 80% done, it was effectively they were still in prototyping mode. And we said, we need a window there. And now is the time.
So lesson learned. Next time you have a VR version. If you had a VR version ahead of time, you would have had that revelation.
We could have simulated it, but then we would have found something different. But and there was a few things. There was extra windows that we didn't need that I'd already put the kibosh on. But because a usage-driven approach, so that was the thing, right? So my wife and the architect had done a really good plan, but they were in designer, what I call designer land, right, where everything looks nice, but it's not so useful, right? And I've got a master's degree in HCI, and I'm a form and function guy, not just a form over function guy.
The difference between UI and UX, right?
Yeah. So HCI is what we used to call UX. And so anyways, so I started going to usage mode. Well, wait a minute. Why is this window there? What are you going to do with it? And we're going to do this. When would you do that? And it's like, we have to, we want to put plates through this window. There's a door 3 feet away. Why would we ruin that wall with a pass-through? It was a pass-through. It wasn't really a window. It was sort of a window, but it was a pass-through. Why would we ruin that wall and lose all that shelf space, which we're desperately short of, when you've got a door 3 feet away that you would actually go through to serve food on the porch, which you probably aren't going to do anyways. Or you do like once or twice a year at most, right? So, but they didn't think, but they were in architecture land. They weren't in usage land, right? So they weren't, and that actually gets back to the toolkit as well. We list things saying, are you thinking about this issue, right? So they didn't know to think about usage, whereas I, luckily did. But if nobody had gone through some scenarios, we would have had this goofy pass through that we probably would never have used.
You would have had
a couple of years now.
You would have had some overproduction. You would have more code to maintain.
Basically. Not quite that, but it would be. But actually, we would have ended up with less shelving to maintain or less shelving to clean.
Oh, okay. Oh man.
But,
Wow.
But just to complete the full circle with the 2025 version of DA, you will have a lot more tool to manage that kind of project in the future.
Yeah, and it's also but like I said, we don't want it to be a dumping ground, right? So we're not, and I don't think who knows, we probably won't add physical construction, but you never know, right? But if we do, we'll be smart about it, and there'll be a phenomenally good reason to do so, and really only the essence stuff gets in there. So for example, when we cover say enterprise architecture, right? So in the enterprise architecture blade, our goal isn't to teach you every single thing about enterprise architecture. It's to give you an overview of enterprise architecture. First of all, let you know, hey, this EA stuff is real. You might want to learn about it. Here's the fundamentals, and here's where you go for more details. Because that's a really big topic, which we have absolutely no reason to repeat, because other, the ISA, for example, has done a phenomenally good job of covering that. But we point to their stuff and say, hey, you know what, here are the fundamental issues you need to know about, and if you want the great and gory details, go here. And that's exactly what we do. So say we added physical construction for whatever reason, that would be the approach. Here's the fundamental ideas. Here's how it fits in, and then go here for details. And then it's what we do with finance, with other security, for example.
Mhm.
Oh, wow. Thanks, Scott. Extremely generous in your time. We
my
appreciate it
pleasure.
very much.
Yeah, I've lost the light. It's gone completely dark.
That's all right. I'll use a special film. I'm an expert with Adobe Premiere now, so I could turn you into a woman if you want. It's all good.
Hey.
Again.
Yeah. Well, I'm in Quebec. You got to turn me into a Saint Hubert's chicken.
There we go. I could do all that. I'm certified now, so I could do anything.
Yeah.
Or
maybe
maybe
I get the road tomorrow. That's my lunch plan. I need to stay in Quebec, the province, long enough to have lunch at Saint Hubert's.
Yeah, well, it's an Ontario company now, so you'll feel right at home. It is. It was bought by an Ontario company.
Oh, yep. Well, there's like maybe 5 in the entire province. There's almost none, whereas like they're almost on every corner here. Yeah. So
when my sister's in town, she lives in Calgary. She's been there for 40 some years. When she's in town, first place, Saint Hubert barbecue.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's sort of surprising that it hasn't basically made it out of Quebec for the most part.
Yeah, I think they tried, but just didn't, because there's the history of Saint Hubert here. So history, but like Chalet Suisse didn't work out here. So
yeah, and that might be it too, right? Maybe Swiss Chalet had their foothold in English Canada and stuff like that. But I've always been surprised that like one of those 2 chains hasn't made it into the States at least. Although I guess they're competing against Chick-fil-A.
Oh, there's so many over there. So many. Hey, Scott, are you easy to reach? There's people who want to know more.
Reach out to me at pmi.org, LinkedIn, Twitter. Okay. I'm a little bad on getting back to people lately on LinkedIn, so I apologize for that. But I'm dealing with issues. So
it's always possible to drum up a conversation with Scott Ambler and learn more about DA or agile modeling or some stats from all kinds of different fields.
Yeah, let's plug that. So I'm gearing back up to do research and surveys again. So
really,
wow, a tweet from me, asking to fill out a survey. Please do so. I would argue I'm one of the better ones at it, and have a history.
Doing it for a while.
Yeah, I've been doing it for a long time, and have share the data, and they're solid. They're always solid surveys. They're always well designed. And,
what's the next thing you'll measure?
After unusual issues.
Like what?
I'm
always looking for scoops.
Yeah. The big scoop is, I can't tell you the details, but technical debt.
Technical debt.
Oh, technical debt.
Okay.
Yeah.
You have to start by defining technical debt. That's another term that's all over the place.
Yeah. Well, it's a huge issue. Always has been. Always, sadly, will be. I suspect. Yeah. But and I'm always a big fan of gathering data about the data community. Not a well-researched community.
All right. So
interestingly enough.
If you have a link towards something regarding that, I'll ping you on that through email. I'll add it to the description.
I'll tweet it. Yeah, it'll be once the my strategy is always send out lots of tweets, send out LinkedIn type stuff.
I get your tweets. That reminds me. Let's end this with a dad joke.
Oh, I forgot.
Go on, Scott. Give us a dad joke. I'm
not prepared with a dad joke, which is sad. We talked.
Can reuse an old one if you want to.
I honestly not. Putting me on the spot doesn't work well on jokes.
I could burn time. My daughter and I have our favorite dad joke.
Oh, okay, go for it.
Two muffins are being put into an oven, and one muffin says, "Hey, it's getting hot in here," and the other muffin says, "Talking muffin."
That's not bad. I actually, if my daughter was here, I could just ask her, and she could complain about 7 different. Oh, Dad, you always say this.
I could go on Twitter and look for one. I mean, there's so many.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's a. I've got the jokes on an automated feed.
Is it? Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
You're taking away all the risk.
Send out that many. Yeah. I write up a batch of them every so often and then put them on an automated feed.
Right. Thanks again, Scott.
My pleasure.
Thanks a lot.
And we'll talk soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.